This is working. First of all, thanks for coming along. Thanks for inviting me down. I've been stuck on the M25. I apologise for that. It's kicking off in my constituency today, so there's a lot going on that I need to deal with and get back to. And I'll just give you one example, really. This campaign is going to get dirty. We've got UKIP in my constituency. The UKIP candidate was the English Democrat candidate before. Then he started marching with the EDL, and now he's UKIP. And I've been supporting a group called Interpal. I don't know whether you've heard of them. They're a charity, a registered charity working in this country, and they operate to provide aid and assistance in Gaza in particular. And there have been various allegations against them in media. Curiously enough, Peter Oban, the right-wing journalist, has been one of their most strongest champions. They've been investigated by the Charity Commission twice and been completely exonerated of any allegations against them whatsoever. But they're one of the few charities that can actually get into Gaza, linking up with others to ensure that assistance is given. And they particularly concentrate on aid and assistance to young people. And the local mosques in my area, we've been raising funds, working with Interpal over the years, basically. And then a few months ago, we put down an early day motion in Parliament, congratulating them on their work and supporting their activities. Now, I think it was signed by about 60 MPs or whatever, including me. So UKIP very kindly put out a leaflet, basically accusing me of association with terrorism, Hamas, and also children who wear bombs around their waist, etc., etc. So it's quite an even, balanced campaign so far. We've reminded the electorate of the UKIP's candidates marching with the EDL and others. It just demonstrates the nature of the campaign that will be waged against us throughout this period by Farage and others. And when we have this debate and Farage gets up and the UKIP people get up and say, you know, the discussion around immigration is not racist, well, in their hands it is racist. And to be frank, the UKIP is a racist party. Whatever they say about, no, we're just opening up a debate or whatever, all those dog whistle politics are now coming to the fore. And I think this is going to be one of the dirtiest election campaigns that we've seen in generations, to be frank. And it's not that will be just UKIP, because the Tories will ride on the back of those allegations and those policies as well. So I think we need to steel ourselves for the next 8 weeks about what the nature of this campaign will be. And I think it's important that, because the election is in 8 weeks' time, you know as well as I do, I came in the door, I was listening to Simeon's speech. In fact, Graham Bash said, listen to this because it's made you redundant. I thought it was really helpful. But it's true, actually. Basically what Simeon said, and Jay, is what I'll be saying as well, is that we're like-minded in that respect. This next 8 weeks is absolutely critical to securing a Labour government. And I want a Labour majority. I want a Labour majority government. Because I think if the Tories get back, there'll be devastation. If there's another coalition of the Tories with the Lib Dems, I think exactly as Simeon is saying, we will not be able to recognise our public services in future because they won't exist. Privatisation on a scale we've never seen. I don't know whether you saw the reportage this week of what's happening with regard to the scale. £780 million worth of NHS contracts going to the private sector in the last weeks of this government. They're trying to use a scorched earth policy to flog off and close down as much as they possibly can. They're forcing through rail franchises as fast as they possibly can now. The two big ones that are coming up are Northern Rail and the Transpennine Express. They're rapidly pressing through. They won't be able to make the deadline of purdah in a fortnight's time when things close down, but they'll have gone so far that a Labour government, if we seek to take those franchises back into public ownership, may be opening up to a legal challenge. Well, we'll have to stand up against that no matter what. But that's what's happening, and it's right way across the piece. It's a scorched earth policy of privatisation, sell off as much as they possibly can, and cut as much as they possibly can, and target as many of the vulnerable groups they possibly can as well, because that's the nature of their politics. And that's why you have the likes of Esther McVeigh, Ian Duncan Smith and others. They'll be rolling out more attacks on people on disabilities. And we saw, I don't know whether you saw it on the TV, Francis Maud made a statement during the week about his attack on PCS, the removal of Chekhov trade union facility time. And basically what that was a message to all other trade unions that we've come for PCS, but you'll be next. Because in the general election campaign, they will be preparing the next attack on trade unions. And that is about, not just about the balloting that the procedures that they want to bring forward, a percentage level of balloting numbers that actually none of them actually make in their general election campaigns, whether in the parliamentary campaigns or in local government. But also they're now talking about wholesale ban of strikes in whole sectors, both in public services, emergency services, but also they're including transport within that too, in an attempt to try and break the RMT. And where they won't ban strikes, what they're trying to do is introduce a model that operates in some parts of Europe where there's minimum service guarantee. So in effect, it negates the opportunity to have a strike which is effective. That's the nature of the discussions that are taking place within the Tory party itself. So I think this battle is, I agree with whatever's been said, this is possibly one of the most critical general election campaigns that we've got on our hands yet, because we're up against a devastating attack from the Tories, with most probably, if they pick up a few seats, with the support of a racist UKIP. And I think we could be seeing the creation of the most reactionary government I think we've ever seen since the Second World War, certainly. So it's critical, absolutely critical. Mobilisations are going on all over the country. If you look at the opinion polls, nationally we're evens with the Tories, but actually the opinion polling for Labour in the marginals at the moment is that we're ahead and we're doing reasonably well. Certainly in London in particular, we're doing very well. We're miles ahead in some seats, as long as we can get that vote out. And it looks as though in areas in England, there are marginal seats, UKIP are damaging the Tories more than they are us. And I think what we've got to do is just make sure that we mobilise. The chance of getting Sarah in, I think, is absolutely critical. Absolutely, this seat is critical now. And you have a candidate I know who's been working hard, but backed by the local party, has come out with a number of political statements which has differentiated herself quite clearly from what's gone on in the past as well. And I think that's commendable, so she deserves our support. Obviously what our problem is at the moment is Scotland. And you talk to Scottish comrades, Katie Clark, Ian Davidson and people like that. They live, I suppose, with the inheritance of the campaign around the referendum. I think it was a strategic disaster to go on the same platform as the Tories.
Absolutely.
It just demonstrated, it allowed the SNP to demonstrate that here you have a group of Westminster parties. And I thought it was interesting. It's about the only thing I've ever agreed with him on throughout his whole political career. Gordon Brown made that decision at the end to make the statement for the Yes campaign, but he made it on a Labour platform. He refused to go on the Better Together platform. He refused to go on the same platform with the Tories. And I think that was a wise decision. In fact, it turned that campaign at the very end with regard to supporting the No campaign. And it was interesting that tactical choice, I think, was right. It was a tragedy it wasn't taken at the beginning of the campaign. And I'll be frank with you, I think the installation of Jim Murphy as leader of the party hasn't changed anything up there whatsoever. I think with Neil Findlay and Katie Clark together, we stood a chance because there was a clearly alternative agenda that they were putting forward. That was going with the grain of Scottish people themselves, you know, around public ownership, redistribution of wealth, and issues around Trident as well. And I think if Neil and Katie had been elected, we would have been a different ball game than we are now. So we're faced with still the prospect. I think it's pulling back a bit in Scotland. I don't think it's been as disastrous as some of the polls are suggesting. But we're faced with the prospect of either a Labour government with a small majority or a hung parliament but with Labour as the largest party. And therefore, we have to discuss as comrades, really, what do we do in that situation? My own view is this, is that if we have a small majority, fine, and we'll come on to the sort of policies that we want to see implemented, because if it is a small majority, the first year of that government is going to be absolutely critical because we could be into a general election very soon after that, within 18 months, something like that. So that first year, we've got to demonstrate the difference between us and the Tories and all others. And I'll come on to some of the discussions about that. The second issue is if we are the largest party, but not with a majority, my view now, and I'd like to hear yours as well, my view is I think we should go into government as a minority government. Yes. And then deal on an issue-by-issue basis rather than forming an overall coalition. There's some head cases talking about a grand coalition between Labour and the Tories. I don't know what they're on, but it's not what we've been smoking anyway. The issue for me is that we need to have a distinct distinct Labour and, as far as I'm concerned, socialist programme to argue in government. And then when we put our proposals up, if people are willing to support them, that's fine. If they're not, it builds the argument then of the policy programme that we then eventually go to the country on the basis of this is what we will support and that they will not. I agree with the discussion. I heard someone was saying about the SNP. It's interesting, the SNP. What a strange coalition it is. They have picked up some progressives and radicals on the left, there's no doubt about it, as a result of the campaign, and also as a result of, to be frank, the behaviour of the Labour Party nationally and in Scotland itself, and the lack of forthright leadership. But at its heart and at its funding base is still the right-wing nationalist capitalists that fund the party and drive the policies of the party. And so the reality is, if we're in a government, in a minority government, and the SNP want to support us on issues, on welfare or on Trident or other, fine. But at heart, if you see what they are doing in Scotland, they're implementing cuts on the same scale as this government. And when it comes to renationalisation, because this has been one of the big issues they campaigned over, when it came to rail and the opportunity to renationalise, they failed to. They put it out to franchise yet again. And now they're looking at privatising Callie-Mac, the shipping, the ferries that we have up there as well. So this illusion that they're a left party all of a sudden, I think would be shattered by the practice in government at this level as well. That's my view, minority government. So what do? I think we need to, I don't think it's working very well. I think what we need to do is be extremely clear about what we stand for. What we stand for. And what I mean we is I mean the left of the Labour Party. I think it's us, to be frank, that could make the difference between having a minority, Labour as the largest party, or Labour as a small majority government. Because people out there want to know the difference between us and the Tories and what we'll do differently. And to be frank, the proposals so far about austerity light, marginal changes here and there on individual policies aren't going to make it. They're not going to make that difference to people. People, you know, when we get elected, people usually march out to support us. They don't go out there on the basis of, well, there's much slight difference between the two. They want to be enthused, and I think we've got to enthuse them about what we're about, the sort of society that we want to shape. The sort of society that we've campaigned for traditionally in the Labour Party as socialist is one that is absolutely thoroughly democratic, both in terms of how we control our local communities, but also democratic at work. It's a society that is equal. So therefore, a more equal society where we overcome these vast differences between wealth and poverty at the moment that we have in our society. It's a society in which we ensure that the nation's assets are held in common to serve the needs of all, rather than a rich minority that can rip us off as a result of privatisation. I think it's a society in which everything we do now, we ensure secures the future in a sustainable way for future generations. And it's a society as well, Simeon was mentioning as I came in which we are a party of peace, not war, and that means, at a minimum, we refuse to hold weapons of mass destruction and we work towards their elimination right the way across the world. That's the society that we want to create. So how do we go about it? With very practical steps to create that society. A few weeks ago we convened a meeting called the Left Platform. For the first time in a number of years we got the 5 or 6 left organisations within the Labour Party to actually sponsor something together rather than slag each other off. It was a near miracle, to be honest. And we brought together what we called the Left Platform, which was a mixture of sponsored by Labour MPs and PPC, some trade unions, policy academics and advisors that have been advising us over the years, rank and file trade unions, rank and file Labour Party members, the key left organisations in the Labour Party, both here in Scotland and in Wales. And in addition to that, we brought together a number of social movements like DPAC, Keep the NHS Public, a number of women's groups and others. And we just talked through what would be the bottom line of us on the left if we're negotiating with a minority Labour government or a Labour government going into a coalition of some sort. Because we need to be part of that coalition, and the Labour leadership has to recognise we're part of the coalition as well. Because if a Labour has a small majority of 3, 4, or half a dozen votes, or in a minority government situation, there are 20, 30, maybe 40 Labour MPs who will be elected next time round who actually will want a say over what that Labour government does. So therefore, to be frank, we have to be as ruthless as the right are in negotiating what we expect a Labour government to do. It's interesting that Progress have convened a conference the weekend after the general election. And they've convened that specifically for the purpose of getting their act together to put pressure on Miliband about who he appoints in government and the policies that will be pursued from the outcome. What we've got to do is exactly the same. And to be frank, if you look at the rank and file of the Labour Party at the moment, the left holds sway. You look at the conference decisions that take place, look at the National Policy Forum, they're all the policies that we've been advocating for years. If you looked at what's happened with the Parliamentary Labour Party, actually the left in the Labour Party now is stronger than it's been for the last 10 years, to be frank. We've had a lot, God knows how they got there, under the wire somehow, but they got there. If you look at the North East, where we were represented by, when I say represented, I mean they held the seats, Peter Mandelson, Tony Blair, Milburn, Byers, all now gone, replaced by Ian Lavery, NUM, in prison during the strike, Ian Mearns, Graham Morris, a whole group of people. As I say, I don't know how they got there. They must have worn masks or beards or something. But they got selected. And that's been happening right the way across the country. Left candidates have been coming into position on a scale we've not seen maybe for 20 years. But in addition to that, what's interesting is people who have not necessarily seen themselves as left in the past have reacted against what's happened under New Labour and are now open to that dialogue about new policies. Sarah's one of them. Sarah today has made a statement which, to be frank, some candidates would not put their name to, but it just shows you that if you engage in discussion, you come up against the real world, people's views then become radicalised, and that's what's happened. So I think there's an opportunity there in terms of the left of exerting an influence on this future of the government that hopefully will be elected, either with a small majority or a minority Labour government, in a way that we can enter into a dialogue again about what the reality of the practical policies are. I've been writing up for Graham Bash's briefing. Sorry that it's late, Graham. He phones me up frantically saying, why are you always bloody late with your article? I've been trying to write up just some of the agreements that came out of the left platform meeting, okay? What are the practical policies the left are talking about in government? Let me just run through them basically. The big issue will be how do we tackle the deficit? Now immediately if we get in there, what will happen is Ed Balls will bring forward an austerity-like budget and they'll want to force through the first round of cuts early on. What we've got to do is resist that because I think it will, to be honest, it will demotivate people immediately, those who want to see a change. And if we are in a delicate balancing situation, and we could be going to the electorate within a limited period of time, it's absolutely critical we win the issue with regard to budgets. And the key issue is that we reject austerity. We just reject austerity. And when they say, what's your solution to austerity? Our solution to austerity simply is we know the deficit could be between 40 and 70 billion at its worst. We also know from Richard Murphy, the Tax Justice Campaign, John Christensen, Prem Seeker, you name the prime academics that own practitioners that have dealt with tax in this country, we also know if there's a deficit between 40 and 70 billion, we know there's 120 billion a year not collected as a result of tax evadance and tax avoidance. So our solution to the deficit is quite simply, the rich bastards pay the money, pay their taxes. Very straightforward. That's the first battle we've got to have. I met with PCS last week. I went to the PCS executive and we'll be putting into the budget debate next week on the 18th to the 20th our own views about how you start that HMRC, the measures that you need to introduce and how we can generate those tax revenues. Even the Tories now admit there's a tax gap of 30 billion. Richard Murphy and others who I have much more confidence in saying 120 billion. That's how we tackle the deficit itself. The second thing that came out of it is we cannot have a Labour government that doesn't say we've got to address these disparities between the rich and the poor. We now live in a more unequal society than whatever they say about the Gini index over the last few years. It's now a more unequal society than any time since the Victorian period. And it's happened as a result of the redistribution of wealth, not from the rich to the poor, but from the poor to the wealthy. And the idea that in some way that the growing economy that we supposedly now have is addressing that inequality is laughable. And if you look at all the recent reports over the last month, the actual inequality is getting worse, not better. So the second issue that came out of the left platform is how do we redistribute wealth? How do we share wealth? Well, there's two things that are just so simple to introduce. One is a wealth tax, and Greg Philo and others up in Edinburgh have been working on it for years, running it through the Treasury model, demonstrates how the wealth tax can not just tackle the deficit itself, but also redistribute wealth to the people at poverty. But also, one of the issues that we've been campaigning for a long period of time is we've got to end the speculation that goes on in the city. There's two things that you need to do that. The first one is introduce the Tobin tax. That tax on the actual speculators' gains. Every speculation that takes place, a small tax which not only brings in wealth, but also slows down the whole process of the speculation that goes on. But the other issue as well, and this is the big one, we have to tackle the credit making in this country. At the moment, the way in which derivatives operate and all the rest of it, the way in which the banks and the finance houses can create credit in an uncontrolled way is building up the debt bubble that will cause an economic crisis within 5 years. That's what everybody's predicting, because the casino is open again in the City of London. The gambling's going on. The bonuses are back on a scale they were before the crash itself. So what we've got to do is control credit. And one way you do that, to be frank, is that you do bring the banks into public ownership. It's as simple as that. Now, when I was the first MP to raise the issue of Northern Rock within Parliament itself, and I did so on the basis of the briefings that we were getting from our own policy advisors. And at that point in time, we knew that they'd have to bring some of the banks into public ownership then. And Alistair Darling, first of all, refused to admit it, and then eventually in the panic that happened that night, and they wake up the next morning, they started nationalising the banks themselves. But what did they do? They nationalised the banks, left the directors in place, never took any controlling shares in them whatsoever, and allowed them basically to start speculating all over again, and then eventually sell them off, so the same people who caused the crisis in the first place when they controlled them now can take control of them again. This is madness. This is the economics of the madhouse. And again, it builds up the next crisis in waiting. So the opportunity of a Labour government coming in and being firm about the control of credit is absolutely critical for us. And also the other issue then that came off the left platform was if we're going to tackle inequality, if we're going to tackle poverty, we've got to end poverty wages. Got to. I don't know what it's like here, but in my constituency, people working all hours God sent to keep a roof over their heads. 0 hours contracts have just bellowed out, not just into the fast food chains and all the rest of it, but into all other sectors as well, and into education and FE lecturers and others. It's right the way across the piece now. And people are exploited for low wages, long hours, and have basic insecurity. This is not rocket science how you tackle it, is it? You introduce a living wage, not the £8 we're promising in 2 years or 3 years' time. That's farcical. £10 an hour will go. Absolutely. Just straightforward. Just a straightforward demand that people can understand. Labour's come forward now and has addressed 0 hours contracts and saying we will abolish exploitative 0 hours contracts. They're all exploitative. We should scrap them and outlaw them altogether, full stop. And the final thing is you cannot maintain wages if you do not live in a society in which collective bargaining determines your wages. So that means restoring trade union rights, basic trade union rights, the ability to take not just strike action but solidarity action as well. And in that way you bring back collective bargaining. Collective bargaining, I mean 15 years ago, 2/3 of wages in this country would be under a collective bargaining agreement. Now we're down to 20%. That's why people are on low wages, and that's why we have poverty. Until we restore trade union rights, there'll always be that maldistribution of power between the employer and the worker, which is exploited by undermining conditions and workers' basic wages. The other issue, and this is, I can't believe we haven't even debated it, it came up in the left platform discussion basically. We need a Labour government, as we've had in the past, every time we've gone to government, that simply says we're committed to full employment. Now that has been the traditional demand of every Labour government since this party was founded. And I can't understand why we're not raising it now, because when you look around you, there's so much needs to be done in our society. The houses that need to be built, the hospitals that need to be renovated, the people that need to be cared for. We argued for years and in recent years for the Green New Deal, where we could create 1 million jobs to ensure that our homes were properly built in a way which didn't waste energy, but in addition to that, whether we developed the technologies for renewable energy. All of those measures could ensure that we never have any person unemployed ever again. Now nowadays that sounds fanciful. That used to be the bedrock of Labour Party policy for generations. Why isn't it now? It's because we've become too timid. I think we've got to take them on and say there's so much needs to be done in our society. All we have to do is invest in it to make sure we put people back to work. Can I just say also, I heard it, we were mentioning about privatisation. If you go to any opinion poll now and look at the response of the general public to privatisation, there's absolute antipathy. There's opposition to you mention the word privatisation, there's opposition. That's why the Tories never say it. They never say the word privatisation. It's always about reform, changing techniques of operation, all the rest of it. My view is we need to go out there straightforwardly and say it, both in terms of the campaign, but when we go into negotiations about the next Labour government and what the left wants, on the table we put very, very square, ending all privatisation and bringing back all that's been privatised so far. That means ending all privatisation in the NHS and bringing back the contracts. It means rail and renationalisation, but also to the ones that have exploited us the most in recent years have been the companies that have taken over water, energy and post. Bring them all back. Bring them all back. That's the solution to it, isn't it? Let me just finally say this, a couple of things as well. I don't know what it's like in this area, you tell me, but in my constituency I've got a housing crisis that we've not seen since the Second World War. We did a meeting last week, we got Ken Loach down and we showed his film Cathy Come Home. We had 200 people there, and you know, the film is black and white and crappy and all the rest of it. Ken introduced it. We watched the film and it was like watching something from today.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's my constituency surgery virtually every day. People are living in squalor. They're being exploited by buy-to-let landlords who are making a fortune out of them. I canvassed the Sunday before last. Woman runs down the street. She was a domestic violence victim, moved out of Hayes, sent to Slough, then Milton Keynes, brought back, put in the same street as the abuser. In the front of the house, she's renting with her child, 2 children. The front of the house, so the front room and upstairs bedroom, 1,450 quid. In the back of the house is another family, 1,450 quid. That landlord is making nearly 3 grand a month out of that property. Most of her housing benefits. She's got a job back at Tesco's, struggling to do the hours. And as a result of that, actually is going to be hit, even on the housing benefit front. That is a scandal. That is an absolute scandal. There's 700,000 properties in this country standing empty. 300,000 of them empty for more than 6 months. That's a crime while there's a family that's homeless. Simple, isn't it, what we build? Not rocket science. We invented it nearly a century ago. It's called the council house. We need 500,000 council houses built. That will get bricklayers back into work again. That will get the apprenticeships going in a proper job as well. We also need to control rents in areas like mine. You tell me what it's like here, but if we don't bring in rent controls, the speculation that will go on. But I also say this, if there's an empty property while their family's homeless, councils should be given the power of compulsory purchase and requisition again to put those families in. It's the only way we'll solve the housing crisis that we've got, with millions now on the waiting list, but in addition to that, thousands in bed and breakfasts as a result of homelessness itself, and the bed and breakfasts are a disgrace. Finally, let me just say this, we have to halt the attack on the poorest. The government have been extremely clever. They use, like UKIP racism to target migrants, but we also use another form of prejudice, which is to target anyone on welfare. What we've got to be is stand up and be the party for this, the party of social security. Our job is to give security. That's why we introduced the social security system under the Attlee government. It means defending those who've been attacked the most. The people they've targeted the most so far in terms of welfare have been people with disabilities. I was at the formation conference of DPAC, and they've been brilliant. They've been, to be honest, an example to us all. They don't take any shit anymore. They go out there, they demonstrate, they occupy, they take direct action, and they win. That's why Atos gave up the WCA contract, because they couldn't take it anymore, the direct action campaign by DPAC. A Labour government coming in should make it very, very clear we're going to scrap the WCA. We're going to scrap all these attacks on people on welfare itself. We're going to end the sanctions regime that's gone from 100,000 a year to 1 million a year, where people are starving. And if people don't believe, you go on Callum's List, the website that was set up in the early days, which lists, or black triangle, which lists the people who've taken their lives as a result of the pressure they're under because of benefit cuts. We've got to be the party, again, of comfort and succour for all those who need it. That means ending the attack on welfare that we've seen under this government. And it also means that we need to re-establish equality legislation which is effective. Women still earn 20% less than men. There's still, whatever Farage goes on, there's still people out there, just because of the colour of their skin, don't get that job, even though they might have the same name as someone else. When they turn up, their face doesn't match. The racism is still out there. And you look at what's happened in terms of the way people have been treated in police cells or in detention centres, and it's an indication of the barbarity of our society because of the lack of equality. Then finally, above all else, we've got to be a party of peace again. That means ensuring no more military adventures, no more attacks on people in the Middle East, no more pretending like Blair and Brown and others did, their generals moving about pieces that don't have any material effect. 500,000 people died in Iraq. I work with a group that continues to try and arrest Tony Blair as a war criminal, and I believe he should be brought before the law. But it means we have to be a force for peace in the world, and that means we're working with allies across the world in terms of conflict prevention and conflict resolution. And there's no use trying to kid people or convince them that we're in favour of peace and conflict prevention and conflict resolution, while in our back pocket we've got nuclear weapons. The Trident vote has got to come early in the next Parliament. We've got to make sure that we mobilise as a party to scrap Trident altogether. We could be one of those countries in the world that's at the forefront of scrapping weapons of mass destruction. That's where we should be as a party. That's a simple agenda, setting out what we stand for. If people, I think, if we can campaign as a party within our constituencies on a platform like that, I think we could win the next election with a good majority. But if it comes down to it and we have a small Labour majority or we're the largest party, we've got to be collectively strong within this party now to set out that agenda and force it through in the negotiations. We're not get it all, but we've got to have a voice on the left that actually demonstrates to people out there there's someone they can place some hope in. What does it require? Just keep repeating it. Absolute determination now on our part. Absolute determination. Courage, standing up. We might be in a minority in some of these discussions, but standing up and making sure that we stand up firmly. But above all else, you know what it is, solidarity. Solidarity.
Thank you, John. And